Oh, sorry, I have a meeting on Thursday.
Oh, you know, yeah, what everybody did, so we're planning another one, so don't feel bad. I need to log into, Zoom, and then open that. Yeah, that's a Google. I have to find stuff. Why am I not finding mine? Oh, there's the thing, okay. Yes, I hope so, yes.
Might be stuck with me.
Welcome you.
Getting over something.
Are you? When did you do losing one?
I did. I was, I had asthma, and I was just like working so hard that I lost it.
I'm having issues trying to, I keep bringing it up and then it disappears on me, so I'm trying to, here it is. No, but I'm not on Zoom yet. I know, but I keep that, when I tried to share my screen, I couldn't find it. That was the, I don't use this computer, it's a bigger. Do you want to do it? Because I can't change it. I'm on Zoom, I have the document open, but I can't seem to get it to show up on the desktop so that I can share it. No, we're already in the, like, can you get out of that thing?
Well, no, this is a weird screen.
I know. Well, I'm glad that,
I don't
here.
Why don't I grab my laptop and I can put it on mine and then everything.
I don't know.
I don't do what you do.
Oh.
Yeah, I went to these people.
Do you want me to read out the numbers to you?
Well, I got,
I think you've got that.
I like them because I can open them wherever I am, except for right now. I opened them, they were open, but they won't show on the desktop for me to share the screen.
So I'll grab my laptop and I can do it from there. How about that?
It's like,
We have to stay
wait.
with the desktop maybe?
There.
Got it?
Now you're really good.
Okay. So here's this, how do I get this
Well,
so that,
you can, you got the Zoom, you could show that. Okay.
Maybe you have to save the document to the desktop.
There's this weird thing on the screen where all it shows is the Google page, but none of the controls on the top. It does that. It switches the screens around or something.
I thought I was in the meeting, but now I don't seem to be able to.
The other screen is fine too.
But I was in the meeting, and I
Yeah,
think
but you need to.
oh, I'm not anymore, okay. Okay. Oh, I see. That was in my mail. I'm so sorry, folks.
It's completely divine. That's true. That's very true.
Laura, do you see that I'm trying to get in again?
Nope, not yet.
Huh.
Who's in the one that's showing up? Isn't that you?
That's that computer.
Oh.
I could just share it on that computer. If I can bring up Google Slides on that computer.
Look at that.
Oh, we're on Zoom. You're up there. So it's just
Yeah,
a
there you
matter of
are.
sharing the screen and finding that.
I think it's the Zoom on here, wherever that is.
So, yeah,
You're there.
that's the problem is it's
Ah,
not
here,
there.
here.
Okay. And now can you share the screen? Good morning. We're having a little technology issue, but we're getting there.
Okay, that's something.
I know. It's so unusual. Well, maybe we can start without the slides, and I can just tell you that this book is by Stephanie Sellers. Came out in 2006. It's called Radical Welcome. So that's been 15 years. And 15 years ago, I was on the visioning committee at St. Mark when we came up with the vision that you see on things that we abbreviated with the rooted in baptism, growing in faith, reaching out to the world. And one of the phrases that George wanted to include in the vision statement at that point, or that he suggested, was radical welcome. I loved the phrase. There was somebody else on the committee who didn't like it at all. Not at all. Okay, there we are. And so, if you look at our statement, you'll see we do not have the term radical welcome in our vision statement. And recently I was talking with a friend, and I mentioned this experience from 15 years ago, and this friend said, oh, I don't like that term either. So I think there's something about the term radical welcome that triggers something in some of us. And so I just thought that maybe we could start today. I've told you a little bit about the book. One of the things that Stephanie Sellers did, she's now the canon Fighting Bishop. One of the things that she did was, you're trying to get in on your phone.
Really?
Oh, I thought it said that. So one of the things that she did is she looked at 8 churches across the country that seems to have shifted and really provided what she would refer to as a radical welcome. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today, but I would also like to think of about from you. What do you think of when you hear that term radical welcome?
I think I read that book a long time ago. Probably 10 years ago. We read it at Calvary. And I think unless you read the book, you have a different interpretation of the word radical, which is, I think, why people would say, oh, I don't like that word, until you read it and understand what it means.
Yeah, so what do you think of when you hear the term radical?
Kind of outside the box, going outside your comfort zone.
Okay, that's really a great way to look at it, outside our comfort zone.
You stole my contribution. That's it.
That's what you were thinking, too, Robert?
Exactly, beyond the comfort zone.
Okay.
And so there's a need for an effort, for special energy. Maybe it's to ask God, give me that strength to walk up to that person.
Yeah.
Because I don't feel comfortable.
Right.
But I'm trying to make someone else feel comfortable and not be a source of good versus good energy versus just that distancing that sometimes you feel when you walk into a service.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm with you on that, 100%.
It's that, I love that phrase about having somebody at your table that you don't really want there.
Wow, somebody at your table you don't want there. I don't know if everybody heard that on
Having
the
the,
lines. Yeah.
having the, being brave enough, I guess, to invite somebody to your table that you
Kind of like the wedding feast when the guests didn't show up and so go out in the streets and bring in the people and you know, and that, I think, hearing that is one of the things that, to me, when I think of radical welcome, I think of Jesus and the parables, but also the way he did extend a radical welcome by going to the margins, you know, outside the comfort zone. So maybe we could just start and introduce ourselves and talk about a time when you felt really welcome, what that felt like. So why don't we start with the people on Zoom? Let's see. Edna, would you like to share a time where you felt welcome? And tell us a little bit about.
Brought up with an understanding of the Latin roots, so radical makes me think rooted in baptism. It's about basically and in a real way. My machine tells me my connection is not stable.
Right, you're coming in and out a little bit.
Well, what we heard, I know what you said is what I think of also, like the word root, the redux, returning to like the beginnings, and then you also mentioned being rooted in baptism. So whatever that welcomeness is, kind of we can look at our baptismal creed to have a description in a way.
Great, thank you. How about the Lamberts, Dan and Darcy?
You can go first.
Oh, no, you can go first.
Uh-oh.
I don't have one.
You've never felt welcomed?
No.
Dan said he's never felt welcomed.
That's not what I meant.
I'm sorry, I just threw you under the bus. A time when I felt welcomed. I mean, and I would say probably for both of us, I feel like I heard this story a lot at St. Mark's. A lot of people have felt really welcomed coming to our church. And I feel like we both certainly felt that, and I, and so many times it's somebody knowing your name. And I think that's the experience of a lot of people at St. Mark's. Someone, being introduced to someone else and being told, hey, this is this person and this is their name. And it means a lot. I'm trying to think.
That's good enough.
That's good. That's when our whole family felt welcomed coming just first couple times we came to St. Mark's.
And I think we're really fortunate that we have a rector that remembers people's names. Because I think that does really make a difference, doesn't it? That you can feel welcome once, but then if you come back and there's no recollection of ever having seen you before, you don't, you're not welcome, doesn't feel so authentic, does it?
We're gonna make everyone name tag.
I
try. Not always great at it.
Yeah.
David loved teaching last year on Zoom because everybody's name
Yeah.
was under their face.
Yeah, 40 years. Yeah, right. A big one for me, was, I'm still very good friends with this guy. I'm actually going to go see him next month. Transitioning, it was like rising high school, so I was homeschooled all the way, and we changed churches, and it was the first time I was going to the youth group, and I didn't know anybody. I'm still a shy kid. Strangely enough, we're all supposed to be getting into this big van to go somewhere, and I got in, and I went. Everybody was supposed to file in and get it, and I went and sat in the back, and then you clearly see people who already know each other, and I was really the only new person. And one of the guys who was joking around and punching his friend in particular places because we're in 8th grade, he saw me back there, and he not even hesitating, he just got up, or he went right to the back instead of sitting with his other friends, and just we talked awkwardly, but just square right for me, and I was like, that made, and like I said, that was we're both what, 32 now? That was so.
And for an 8th grader to do that is amazing. To leave
it
their
is.
friend group
Yeah,
and come
Yeah.
and reach out to you, that's really, that was kind of radical.
yeah, and of course the other guys he was beating the tar out of, we're all friends now, but so. A lot of people still do, yeah. And we're all this high, we're all this tall, so, yeah.
That's the way guys like to interact,
Yeah.
dancing and, something like that.
My sisters do it too, so.
Yeah. Lindsay, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us about a time you felt welcome?
Hi, I'm Lindsay, and yeah, so one time when, going into St. Mark's, we definitely felt a strong, very warm welcome the first time our family came about 7 years ago. Another time was when Alex and I were newly married, or actually it was before we got married, but we were engaged, and I visited him a lot of weekends, and we didn't have time to get to a church far away, so we went to the nearest church we could find, and it was an Episcopal church. It was both of our not our first time in one, but it became our first Episcopal church. And it was a small, but very, very warm, welcoming, amazing place. And I don't really recommend this, but we walked in and everyone was so happy to just see new people, new young people, that they actually turned to us and said, would you like to take the consecrated elements to the altar? Like our first day, they put that on us. They gave us the stuff to take to the altar and gave us instructions. We were like, wow. But then the passing of the peace, since it was a small church, everybody went to everybody. It took kind of a long time, but everyone introduced themselves to us. Everyone said they were glad we were here. And it was quite an experience. And that was an amazing church for the first about 7 years of our marriage before we moved out here. So. And when I think of radical welcome, like Edna said, I do think of the word root, and I think of how at our core, we're all made in the image of God. And so when I hear radical welcome, I think of the very essence of our humanity reaching out to each other in love. So.
That's nice. I like that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Sue, Mylander, are you wanting, you're muted.
There, now I'm unmuted. I think that for as long as I have been at St. Mark's, which has been a long time, I have felt welcome. When we first came here, we were drawn into lots of activities and made to feel as though we were valuable. And as I said, that's been a long time ago, and I don't know that I think that the church hasn't always been as welcome as it is now, but I'm really, I'm actually thrilled that we're as welcoming as we are right now.
I really like what you said about feeling valued. You know, that it's not just, oh, it's great to have another person in the seat, but that there's something of value to you and that you contribute to the community. And I think we'll talk about that more when we talk about what does it mean to be truly inclusive and welcoming. Yeah, Josh.
So along those values, and along with what Lindsay said, putting up the elements, for me, and probably for a lot of other people, you feel it when somebody gives you some kind of responsibility or asks you to do something. And it doesn't have to be leadership, but it's kind of interesting, as opposed to like, no, let me do everything for you. It's kind of the other way around. Can you do this thing?
Right.
And it's like a sense of value and a sense of placement.
Yeah, and you're kind of being invited in. So for the sake of time, although the people who are present physically in the room are just as important, how about if we just go around and say who we are and we get heard some good ideas about people's experience with welcome. So Ashley, would you like to start?
Sure. I'm Ashley. What am I just saying my name?
Well, and you can tell us maybe how long have you been at St. Mark's?
Yeah.
4 weeks in person. YouTube a bit, a couple months.
Right, and I think, it's great too, because you've been coming to this group, and I think that for a lot of people, when they're new, it's like, oh, should I do that? But I think it makes a difference in terms of starting to feel part of things. So.
I'm David Fletcher. This is my first Sunday. I guess what 20 years ago. I think I was just thinking of something. I don't know if it's relevant, but think of some event we had where back in the days where we could all get together. We were in Van Hall. There were tables. We got some food, and we looked for a place to sit. They're the people you really want to sit with, but that table's full. Right. So then when you go to another table, you have to. And it says you're welcoming them, even though they're welcoming you to the table. But that's a little experience of being out of your comfort zone. And there's only some places people I don't really know very well. I've seen them, but I'm going to sit there anyway. And if they'll have me, and if they go away, then
Saving the seat for people we like.
Right.
There may be somebody better coming along. Assuming that they're not, that's the kind of experience of structuring and I guess getting a sort of welcome and also expecting a welcome.
Are those of you on Zoom able to hear the people here talking? Thumbs up, thumbs down, kind of a little bit. Okay, so when you're talking,
Sounds muffled. It's because of the masks. Voices sound muffled. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm David Fletcher,
Okay, so I'm Joyce Fletcher, and I'm going to ask.
So I'm Joanne Lyman. I'm one of your deacons. I've been here about 2.5 years. And one of the ways that I felt welcome. I remember, pre-pandemic, we all stood in here in Manhall and or in the library and had coffee hour. And let me tell you, I'm an introvert, massively, and a little bit on the shy side, believe it or not. And I remember, I mean, it's like going to a cocktail party where you don't know anyone. And so I was standing there with my coffee, and I'm just deer in the headlights look. And I talked, and David and Joyce said hi, and the Muellers said hi, and the Lanzillos said hi, and I thought, okay, I'll be all right. You know, we made small talk and so on. You know, as time goes on now, you know, I know these folks a little bit better. Thank God.
Good morning, I'm Richard. I have a 5-week pin from St. Mark's. The welcome here, of course, has been extraordinary. As an owner of the Prodigal Son t-shirt, I feel welcomed by God, and it's shown and shared by those around the table. And when I've been to my other church back in Kentucky, I felt like I was like a nephew to those people. So I think that's God at work.
Thank you, Richard.
I'm Josh. I told a story already.
Okay.
I'm Hester. I've been here 2.5 years, I think. Yes, very welcome.
My name is Cecilia Smith. I've been here 15 years. I do, can I make a comment? Even though I'm sitting at this table instead of over there. There are a couple things that I think of. The word radical, I'm very supportive of a lot of radical things. But as an introvert, radical welcome is very scary. And there are times when I've been radically welcomed that it doesn't feel good at all. And I remember when I was much younger and I was kind of looking at churches, and I went to a church. It was the first time I'd been to a church in many years, and I went to a church. It wasn't even a church, and people were coming. I mean, I wanted to be there to observe and be and worship or connect with, and people, they were perfectly friendly and normal and nice, whatever that would be. They asked me my name and where I lived and did I know about me. It doesn't always feel good to have people coming and being with you. And sometimes when it takes, you know, I've come a very long way. Well, at all the churches I've gone to, and being married to George, you know, I had to be less introverted than I am, but sometimes I just have to go be quiet for a week after a lot of things happen. And I think when we welcome people or introduce ourselves, it's important to give space. And also, you know, pre-pandemic, maybe people don't want to be hugged as a priest, as a piece. As a priest either. But I think that part of welcoming is being sensitive to who and where the other person might be, and trying to take a minute to read that.
Because one of the ways that I kept is I was left alone when I came for 6 or 8 months, totally left alone. I just came to 8 o'clock and left. And I felt
that's ideal. I mean, when you're getting to know a person.
Right.
Especially
Yeah.
at the 8 o'clock, makes it easier to do that. It's important to be, coming from where I come from, it's important to be able to observe. And it's good to give people space. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't say hello to people. We should. And make it, but not necessarily.
It's that reading.
Yeah.
You can kind of tell some facial gestures, body language. Like there are clearly people that I've talked with who are like, oh, this person wants to be asked questions. And it's like, okay, cool, I got that signal right.
Yeah.
And then other times, like, especially working, kids at the library, I can tell like the body language of like, hey, leave me alone, I'm okay.
I don't mean to put a damper on things, I just have to.
No, and I think that's a good distinction, because I think that radical welcome, and we'll get into that more, doesn't mean super gregarious necessarily.
Right.
It's more about depth than it is about breadth, I think. Yeah. Yeah. Slow depth. And Patty, we were just going around introducing ourselves and saying maybe a time you felt welcome.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear all of your comments. I definitely identify as an extrovert, and my experience here has been very much ambiversion, because I think that there are a lot of people that do identify as introverts. I think more so than we want to acknowledge, or maybe that are acknowledged. But, you know, an extrovert's paradise, right, is, you know, a cocktail hour where you're at where there's a bunch of other extroverts, and everyone is very sociable. It's easy, right? And that's not necessarily the experience that I want to have at church, or in my faith life, or in my spiritual life. So I think that acknowledging that, giving that space to people, whether it's wherever it occurs, you know, I think a lot of magical things happen in space and in silence. So, I mean, even I'm a pretty strong extrovert, but the time that I felt really welcomed at this church was when one person, not a whole slew of people, when one person came to my house and said, you know, we noticed that you were new and you signed your name and put your address. So here, you know, because you gave me that information, I brought you flowers. And it was not this like huge, you know, although I've now found quite a large community, but it was not that large community that made me feel welcome. It was the one-on-one person that came and said, you know, welcome, you know, and that's what made me feel really welcome. And I'm Patty, by the way, for you guys who don't know. Okay. Hi, Lambert.
And so one of the things, I think we're not going to get that far today because we have so much to say, but one of the things in this book, there's a whole website with resources, and there are like 12-week studies on how to be a radically welcoming parish. And I think that, you know, we're going to just scratch the surface today, but that's something, you know, maybe if this is something that a few people would want to think about doing, of getting more in depth in a study that way, I think that certainly this topic lends itself to that. So, according to, I'm going to move my people.
Already good, I'm here.
Yeah, I see. I thought that was my screen. Okay, so I like this graphic. God's doors are open to all.
Is that better? Or do you want to see people?
So that's good. So radical welcome, according to Stephanie Feller, here's a whole lot of words: hospitable, connected, centered, open to conversion, intentional, comprehensive, becoming. I like that word becoming too, because it's like we haven't arrived, it's in process. Beyond diversity. And what is that? It's beyond diversity. Faithful, compassionate, real. And this quote, the community seeks to welcome the voices, presence, and power of many groups, especially those who have been defined as the other, pushed to the margin, cast out, silenced, and closeted, in order to help shape the congregation's common life and mission. So to me, this really seems like what Jesus did, right? To me, the gospel message has always been that God, that Jesus was really about that going out to the margins, reaching out to the poor, to the powerless, to the oppressed, to the least of these. And yet, if we look at the structure of so many churches, that's not what we see, right? How do we do that?
I particularly like the idea of sharing power. So it means that the people we're bringing in are not simply a project, but people who will then be taking responsibility. And it means we have to be willing to share our little piece of what people are trying to bring in.
Right. You know, one of the people from the church in St. Paul that she looks at talks about that and says, you know, we have to really look at what it takes to give that power to others.
What did it take?
Pardon me?
What did it take?
They spent 5 years really working on just reaching out to the community and developing relationships within the community. But that also means she said, the woman who was quoted there said, people don't like to be seen as a project. If it's kind of like, oh, you know, we decided we're going to bring in, you know, all these good people. Right.
So one of my favorite quotes when I use frequently is by someone named Lila Brown, and she says, if your salvation is not tied up in mine, then basically forget about it. If I'm going to be a project of yours, if I'm going to be someone who you simply, you know, throw a couple of dollars to, then let's not. But instead, let's be in relationship with one another. Let this work of going against poverty be something that enriches both of us.
Yeah, and this church in St. Paul, you know, struggled with that because they allowed homeless people not just to come to the church, but to take positions of power in the church. And that, you know, that's radical. It's not something that we generally have experienced, right?
I am not privy to probably most of the goings on of the church, but are we doing anything radical here?
With what?
Are we doing anything radical here? Like, what are you guys who I know the church well, I mean, again, you don't have to give me your official assessment, but like, have you seen things? Like, are we doing things, or what's the landscape look like?
I would say that the starting of the Spanish ministry was radical.
The idea that we're not two congregations, as much as we can be unified.
I think it's just a very exterior thing, but I think putting signs out in front of the church is rather radical. I mean, I noticed that the Lutheran church that we live across from has had the pride flag on their sign for probably 15 or 20 years, but we didn't have that sign up there, you know? Thank you, Joanne. She's like, the proud pride woman.
What I think is very radical, though, is particular ground. Because it's beginning with, are you familiar with it? So it was a 10-week deep dive into racism. And it was this work, and I think, so a lot of reading and academic sort of kind of things, but it went further than that. It went into, you know, the trauma of racism, how it traumatizes both white people and people of color, how it goes back into roots, like we were talking about, what the roots of racism are. And I think it has affected some kind of internal change, and when we are changed like this, we change our church, we change our community, when I'm sitting here and reading and talking about it, because now the same group who has been doing the Sacred Ground anti-racism work wants to go further. And then, you know, what does that mean now? And it's not just a superficial, well, I love my black brothers and sisters, or my Native American brothers. So how now do we be in relationship with them as humanity?
You know, this is odd to say, because this is the first time you're hearing that I'm saying this. I was the last shift on the mum sale. And as I was walking back to deliver some money, a woman walked past me and said, I hate that Black Lives Matter sign. You should be a better church. And I stopped and I listened to her. And I asked her, could you explain why you feel that way? And I said, and at the end, I didn't have an answer. I was not going to heal her. But I was going to say, thank you. Because I just feel very differently. And it's not that we exclude, this is inclusion. This is not a door, it's an opening. And I thanked her, and she went on her way, and I went on my way. I think that if we're the church, we're the radical ones. We have to accept that role as being radical ourselves, and then put in the work to define what that means to us. With help from others.
I really like that you were patient enough to, and that you welcomed her.
Yeah, that's pretty that was pretty radical.
Well, you know, I've had my moments. I'm just saying.
George got a call from Tony and we can put it out this week and about exactly the time, and he spent a half hour talking to him on the phone and listening and a conversation. And at the end, Tony said, well, you want a good one. And of course, Tony, I was happy to have coffee with you and talk to you about this more. And maybe they will, with Tony's own, but it was exactly like you say, and that is that you just say, not to say, this is what I decided about you based on what you just said.
To me, something that's really radical is that each of us as individuals is willing to look inside and kind of do the work of trying to look at our own biases and our own beliefs and be willing to have that challenged a little bit, because that's difficult. That's hard work. And I think that that's what you're getting to with the Sacred Ground work too. It's really, it's in-depth work of going in on.
I'm going to go back to the 1 o'clock service. It's been here that so long, and it just tells us who we are. But when George started it, he said, you know, there's a need there, there's a need, a big response from people in the street. Well, we don't have any statues of people in Glen Ellen. Because it wasn't, and so it was radical to say, yes, we do, and we're going to provide this. And people, the first day they did it, 50 people came. And it was because Victor, George hired Victor, and Victor went to every workplace he could think of where he would be reaching people and off the cars and talk to people. And that first day, they came in. I still remember 2 families left that they figured out that we weren't Catholic. But many other families that we had a meal, like coffee hour, I made a casserole, like a pot. But anyway, people came back. But it was, there were concerns about, oh, well, can people use the parish hall without somebody from the others? I mean, that's a long time ago, like giving up, saying, here we are, this is our house, and everyone is here. And we forget that it's a lot of exactly what you're talking about, and because it doesn't feel radical.
Well, if you look at this quote, the spiritual practice of embracing and being changed by the gifts, presence, voices, and power of the other, the people systemically cast out or marginalized within a church, a denomination, and or society. I would answer your question, Patty, by saying that you personally have done something radical, welcoming in the church in this regard, because I think as much as we want the 1 o'clock service to be one church, a lot of times that doesn't happen, and one place that it doesn't happen is in the women's group. And Patty has taken on the job this year of doing programming for women's group. In our first meeting, she invited the women from our Spanish-speaking service to be the presenters. So giving over the power, you know, and it was a lovely, lovely evening. I wish more people had known about it to be able to be there. And David
No, and actually, like, to comment, to add to that, the idea that you are changed by the gifts, presence, voices, and power of the other, so the Hispanic community is the other here. I will say that they did a much better job than any of the people from the English-speaking community at organizing and putting together a big event. They were more organized, more on top of everything, and so there was definitely a big gift there in for the rest of us, because we got to experience all of this wonderful event. So we're doing another one in October.
Right, and so October 6th is another one where women from the Spanish-speaking service will be leading really with the Day of the Dead. Is that right?
Yep. We're making a friend of.
Okay.
Yeah. So
you know, and I think, to me, I really appreciated that you did that. I feel that was really saying, okay, we're kind of relinquishing the power, and I personally will admit that I got nervous about it because I didn't know what was happening, and I texted Libby, who's the organized chairperson for the women's group, and said, you know, is anybody bringing beverages? I know they're bringing food. And so I had a whole trunk full of beverages, but I walked in.
did, really?
Yep, but I walked in and I saw that they had everything taken care of. So I did not bring in my beverages. But you know, that's partly my own kind of, it's not easy to kind of relinquish the power and trust that the result is okay.
Cross-cultural.
Right, yeah.
There are two things that I kind of wanted to point out here. One is spiritual practice, which to me indicates something that you are intentional about and something that is a regular sort of thing. And I hope, and the hope is, and I think it happens, whether we want it or not, whatever our spiritual practices leads into our daily lives as individuals and humans in the community. So if you have a spiritual practice of radical welcome, I mean, imagine how transforming and transformative that is to your life and to the life of the people around you. One other thing is it's a Jesuit spiritual practice that I kind of like. And it's the thought about, you know, so I think you can boil it down to, so where is Jesus and where am I? So I think from our studies of scriptures, you know, Jesus tends to be with the marginalized, with the people cast out, with the people who have been left out of society. So now where am I? in relation to that. And so that's a question to think about.
What is the practice?
It's one of the spiritual exercises, the Ignatian spiritual. Almost called the two standards. Yeah, and so again, I think again it boils down to is where is Jesus here in this situation, in this community, in my life, in this situation.
That's always shifting. Yeah. So that means you can't, if we're going back to the becoming idea, we're always moving forward. Yeah. And it's also a comforting practice for the person doing it because Jesus is also there with yourself. So here and there, and then it kind of helps give a vision, because if you can clarify kind of the big idea, Jesus is with the marginalized, you can really build a context of your own life in there and say, what should I be doing now? Where's my, how can I act out in faith and discipleship and still use that practice to be like, oh, I should be going and doing this thing. It can really give some clarity to how to be practical. But yeah.
And if you welcome this person in my name, then you welcome them.
Yeah.
So, but I always want to remind us that Jesus is everywhere, right? With everyone. And I mean, it's important to remember that Jesus is present with the marginalized. But Jesus goes to everyone.
Yeah.
Right? And Jesus is God, right? So, I mean, when we use the name Jesus, we are understanding God in a particular way. But God is with everyone,
right,
all the time. And, so I think sometimes if we start thinking he's with the marginalized, maybe he's not with me because I'm not marginalized. I mean, and I think there's a danger in that.
It makes you feel marginalized.
Right, it makes me feel marginalized. So David, then Jesus comes to you because
to me, though, that's like a Black Lives Matter. So
say more.
Yeah. So yeah. So if with the marginalized, if that house is on, those are those.
That's a human understanding. God is everywhere with all people, right? And so, I think we have to. I think what the world doesn't know is that God is with the marginalized, right? I mean, often it seems like God is with the privileged, but God is everywhere. But I mean, so we need to have both.
Yeah. Having attended service here at St. Mark's for the first two times by Zoom, I identify with our good friends and neighbors who are on Zoom right now. That you feel that distance, and yet you can still be part. You can still be part. My life experiences said that the borders that we have, that we see in life, wealth being one of them, everyone has a part of themselves that's marginalized, that they feel out, and that they feel other, regardless of their place in society. So, another life experience, and I feel it here, is that when people speak to me, they are present. And that's been part of my life experience, to be present with someone. They know. So what you said about a relationship, they know what, don't throw money at me. Don't throw a few, pleasantries and sentences at me. Have the relationship. And that makes a big difference. And I feel that here.
We have a baptism family. I'm going to go just say hello to them. So, excuse me for a minute. Michael.
So one of the churches studied was in Inglewood, California, and the rector there said it's time to bring a different set of questions. Not just how do we get more people, but how do we share power? How do you create a culture that is flexible and fluid enough to be open, constantly evaluating and reorganizing based on the reality around you? So I think part of that is scary too, because it's Just say, we're constantly changing. And change is always threatening.
I think the Presbyterians especially are not, you know, saying things. You know, there are all sorts of stories about how, you know, you can't do it this way because the last lesson did it, you know, the other way. And that's what we're used to. And we like having things that we're used to. And I think when it comes to particularly what happens in a service, you know, it's very resistant to change there.
Right, and that goes back to what Richard said at the very beginning, it's like getting out of our comfort zone.
You said it first.
Yeah. So, what radical welcome is not, is saying, come here and be like us, an invitation to assimilate. It's not, oh, aren't we great because we're helping these people who are the other? Not a feel-good ministry. It's not reverse discrimination. Okay, we're going to put all of the disenfranchised and, it's not a conventional church growth strategy by any means. It's not just about being politically correct. So what is it? It's about finding yourself utterly accepted and embraced by God and then running into the world in your community to see how you can extend that hospitality to others.
Okay, let's do this.
Can I just make a quick statement about that definition?
Yes.
I'm a physical therapist and I work with patients who have very limited mobility. I work in the wheelchair center at Marian Joy, and so I'm kind of a little bit biased on who I think are marginalized in our society. But I think of this and I think about how our society, we have these ADA regulations and so much changed in the 80s and then again in the 90s in terms of equipment that's available and legislation that really opened up so many doors physically throughout, buildings and throughout the community with curb cuts and whatnot. And yet there have been hardly any strides really to make those who have disabilities actually feel like valued members, or actually like there's not this sense in general in our culture that they're valuable members who have real gifts and they're not people that we can really give power to, to have real roles in most of our daily lives. So anyway, I just think it's a great explanation saying it's not just about finding people and like finding a way to like let them physically be in the building with you but you can't make somebody who has different abilities or has disabilities be like you and do the same things you do in the same ways. You just can't. But that doesn't mean that they don't have gifts and things to offer. And I just feel like I don't know, I think it's a pretty vivid picture of how our society's tried to include a particular group of people and yet still have not valued them.
That's great insight, yeah.
Yeah, everything Darcy said and extending physical mobility to basically how the brain works. As a mother of an autistic child, like I really feel what Darcy said, applying, and I know that what Darcy meant.
I would include that
absolutely included beyond physical ability to neurodiversity as well. I know. And so thank you for saying that, because I feel like this is all radical welcome is about getting down to the foundation so that inclusion is not just bringing in more people to be like us and to be able to teach more people and to reach the pinnacles of success that as they've been defined by it's to really change the foundation so that inclusion isn't just what are we being included in. What we're being included in is just not defined by a hierarchy of success, and you're included if you can reach the standards that have been set by others. It's a foundation where what it means to be radically included and welcome and a real part of something is about recognizing the gifts of everyone, and in particular those whose gifts haven't been considered gifts at all. You know, the way accommodating can, you know, has been treated like a burden instead of an amazing opportunity to bring in people who will enrich our lives in ways we can't even imagine, because they're not there yet, because we haven't let them be there yet.
I'm sorry to be the
Thank you, Lindsay.
Grim Reaper. I have to,
Yeah.
I have to end the Zoom part.
I think the energy around this topic shows that it would be a good study to do for, 6 or 12 weeks to really get in depth on the topic. But thank you so much for all of you
Thank you.
contributed today.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
bye.
you.
Thank you all.